The crack of thunder masked the sound of Dr. Eliana Mendez's coffee mug shattering against the laboratory floor. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, chasing a breakthrough in her genetic research that remained frustratingly out of reach. Her exile to this remote research station in the Cascade Mountains wasn't voluntary. The scientific community had a long memory for perceived ethical violations, even when the accusations were false. "Damn it," she muttered, kneeling to collect the ceramic shards as rain lashed against the reinforced windows. 3 years in isolation had sharpened her focus but dulled her social graces. Not that it mattered out here, where her only visitors were monthly supply deliveries and the occasional curious deer. The security alert chimed, its soft tone nearly lost beneath the howling wind. Eliana frowned, tapping her tablet to bring up the perimeter cameras. Nothing should have triggered the motion sensors in this storm. A figure stumbled into frame, collapsing against the electric fence without triggering its defensive protocols. Impossible. The fence was calibrated to detect and repel any living creature. Eliana grabbed her emergency kit and raincoat, curiosity overwhelming caution. Outside, the rain came down in frigid sheets, instantly soaking through her protective gear. 20 meters from the main entrance, the figure lay motionless, illuminated by sporadic lightning strikes. It wasn't human. The body was humanoid but slender, with limbs slightly too long for proportion. Its skin appeared porcelain white where it wasn't covered by a tattered silver garment. Most striking were the intricate blue markings visible through the torn clothing, swirling patterns that pulsed with their own light. Eliana's scientific mind catalogued details even as she checked for vital signs. The skin was fever-hot despite the cold rain, and a rhythmic vibration, perhaps a heartbeat, thrummed beneath her fingers. The creature's eyes snapped open, revealing irises of molten gold without pupils. "Help, she said in accented but perfect English. "Please." Back in the lab, Eliana worked methodically, medical training overriding her shock. The being called herself Kira and managed to explain through a small translation device that she came from a planet called Athoria. The glowing markings covering her torso and extending down her limbs were evidence of what her people called the separation, a genetic mutation that marked her as unfit for their society. "They say I am cursed," Kira explained, wincing as Eliana gently cleaned a laceration. "The markings grow. Eventually, they will reach my brain, and I will die." "These patterns follow your nervous system," Eliana observed, professional fascination momentarily eclipsing the impossibility of the situation. "How did you find me?" "Why me?" "Your research. The papers you published on genetic repair and cellular regeneration. I've been studying Earth for years, planning my escape." Kira's golden eyes held Eliana's gaze. "You were cast out for pushing boundaries. So was I." Eliana's throat tightened. "My papers are years old. And discredited. Not by everyone. I built my ship based on modifications to your theories." A spasm of pain contorted Kira's features as the blue markings flared brighter. "I have perhaps 3 Earth months before the separation completes. Will you help me, Dr. Mendez?" Before Eliana could answer, the lights flickered violently. The backup generator kicked in with a whine as something electrical shorted nearby, sending a shower of sparks across the lab. Instinctively, they both lunged to protect a precarious stack of equipment. Their hands collided, and an electric shock, far stronger than static electricity, jolted through Eliana's body. Kira gasped, her markings suddenly pulsing in rhythm with Eliana's racing heart. "What was that?" Eliana whispered. "I don't know," Kira replied, her voice trembling. "But it has never happened before." 14 days had passed since Kira's arrival, and a routine had developed between the unlikely pair. Mornings began with Eliana drawing blood samples and scanning the progression of the luminous markings that now extended across 70% of Kira's body. Afternoons were dedicated to genetic sequencing and computational modeling. Evenings brought shared meals and increasingly personal conversations as the initial wariness between them softened into something more complex. "Your genetic structure is unlike anything I've ever seen," Eliana said, studying the three-dimensional holographic projection hovering above her workstation. "These markers here, they're not random mutations. They're engineered." Kira stood beside her, close enough that Eliana could feel the unusual heat radiating from the alien skin. Her silver-white hair was pulled back in a practical braid, revealing the delicate pattern of blue lines now creeping up her neck. "Engineered by whom?" "I suspect your ancestors," Eliana said, manipulating the projection to highlight specific sequences. "Look at the symmetry, the redundant coding. This isn't evolution, it's design. I think the separation might be a deliberate failsafe to prevent genetic drift in your species." "A genetic purity test," Kira murmured bitterly. "Those who deviate too far are eliminated." Eliana nodded. "But understanding the mechanism gives us an advantage. The markings themselves appear to be a manifestation of genetic expression. When they activate," she stopped, noticing Kira's sudden wince as a wave of blue light pulsed across her exposed forearm. "What triggers them?" Eliana asked, gentler now. "Pain?" Kira's golden eyes darkened. "Strong emotion. Particularly." She hesitated, looking away. "Desire. Affection." The implication hung between them, unacknowledged yet undeniable. Eliana had noticed the patterns brightening whenever their hands brushed during sample collection or when their eyes held contact too long. "That's why intimacy is forbidden for those with the separation," Kira continued quietly. "It accelerates the progression." Eliana's scientific mind raced with implications while something deeper, something she'd thought long dormant, stirred in response. "That's why you left Ethoria," she realized. "Not just to find a cure, but because you couldn't live without the possibility of connection," Kira finished. "My family performed the rites of severance when the marks first appeared. I became dead to them that day." Later that night, exhaustion and vulnerability lowered their carefully maintained boundaries. They sat together on the small couch in Eliana's quarters, the remains of dinner pushed aside, a rare bottle of wine half empty between them. "My ex-fiancé stole my research," Eliana admitted, the words easier to speak in the dim light. "Modified my genetic therapy model, published it under his name, and then testified against me when complications arose in clinical trials. He's now heading a prestigious institute while I'm exiled to this glorified bunker." Kira's markings shimmered softly as she reached out, hesitating before resting her hand atop Eliana's. "On Ethoria, we believe that those who suffer unjustly gain unique perception. Your exile has given you insights others lack." The warmth of Kira's touch radiated up Eliana's arm. The alien's golden eyes reflected the soft glow of her markings, making her otherworldly beauty almost painful to witness. "I dreamed of you," Kira whispered. "Before I came to Earth. I saw a woman with eyes like twilight who would either save me or complete my destruction." Eliana found herself leaning closer, drawn by something beyond scientific curiosity. "And which do you think it will be?" "Perhaps both," Kira answered, her voice barely audible. The kiss was tentative, exploratory, a scientist's careful hypothesis and an exile's desperate hope combined. Kira's lips were surprisingly soft, warmer than human temperature, tasting faintly of something like cinnamon and ozone. For 3 heartbeats, the world contracted to the space between their bodies. Then Kira jerked backward with a cry of pain, her markings flaring brilliant cobalt. She collapsed to the floor, her back arching as blue light pulsed frantically beneath her skin. "Kira!" Eliana dropped beside her, medical training taking over as she turned the alien onto her side. "Breathe through it, focus on my voice." The seizure lasted 47 seconds, Eliana counted every one, before the glow subsided to its usual shimmer. Kira's breathing gradually steadied, but the markings had noticeably expanded, now reaching the base of her skull. "I'm sorry," Kira whispered when she could speak again. "I shouldn't have." "No," Eliana cut her off, helping her to sit up. "I'm the one who should apologize. I knew the patterns responded to emotion and she stopped, unwilling to name what had happened between them. Kira's golden eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of pain and longing that twisted something in Eliana's chest. "How much time do I have left?" Eliana's scientific detachment faltered as she assessed the progression. "At this rate, perhaps 5 weeks before the markings reach your brain." "Then we must work faster," Kira said, struggling to her feet with Eliana's support. "And we need to be more careful about triggering episodes," Eliana added, trying to sound clinical despite the lingering sensation of Kira's lips against hers. Neither of them acknowledged the impossibility of that task, now that the barrier between them had been breached, however briefly. As they made their way back to the lab, Eliana's mind was already racing toward a solution, one that might save Kira's life, even if it meant risking her own heart in the process. "Human DNA may be the key," Eliana announced, her voice hollow with exhaustion. She'd been working for 36 hours straight, fueled by synthetic caffeine and the growing panic as Kira's markings continued their inexorable spread. Kira looked up from the microscope where she'd been examining her own tissue samples. In the 3 days since their kiss, they had maintained a careful physical distance while working with renewed urgency. "Human DNA? How?" Eliana pulled up a split-screen holographic display showing a strand of her own DNA beside Kira's. "These complementary markers here," she said, highlighting sections that pulsed in synchronization. "Your genetic structure is fundamentally different from mine, but there are unexpected similarities, almost like lock and key components." She manipulated the display, simulating the interaction between specific sequences. The virtual strands spiraled together, forming a stable hybrid structure. "The separation is essentially an autoimmune response," Eliana continued. "Your body attacking itself because it recognizes certain genetic expressions as foreign. But if we could introduce compatible human genetic material to neutralize the reaction." Her voice trailed off as she realized the implications of what she was suggesting. Kira's golden eyes widened. "You mean a genetic exchange between us?" "Yes," Eliana said, her clinical tone belying the heat rising to her cheeks. "The process would require intimacy." The word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its scientific application. "A temporary merge of genetic material through bodily fluids," Eliana elaborated, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "It would be risky. The initial exchange would likely trigger your markings intensely, but if my theory is correct, subsequent sessions would gradually diminish their reactivity." Kira's markings pulsed softly beneath her skin as she absorbed this information. "On Athoria, such merging is considered sacred," she said quietly. "Even among those without the separation, it is not undertaken lightly." "I understand if you'd prefer to explore other options," Eliana said, though her research had yielded no viable alternatives. "No," Kira said firmly. "I came to Earth willing to try anything. But you should know." Her voice faltered. "I have never experienced such a connection. The markings appeared when I was young, before such things were permitted." The admission sent an unexpected wave of tenderness through Eliana. She thought of her own limited romantic history, clinical encounters with colleagues that had felt more like scientific experiments than genuine connections. "We'll proceed carefully," she promised. "I'll develop a protocol to minimize risk and discomfort." That night, as Eliana worked on treatment protocols, a violent spring storm descended upon the mountain laboratory. Lightning struck uncomfortably close, causing the power to fluctuate before failing completely. The emergency backup systems activated, providing minimal lighting but insufficient power for the sensitive research equipment. "We should conserve energy," Eliana said, finding Kira in the dim corridor. "The storm could last for days," and the solar collectors will be useless until it passes. They retreated to Eliana's living quarters, which were slightly warmer than the rest of the facility. The emergency lighting cast everything in a ghostly blue glow, not unlike the light emanating from Kira's markings, which provided additional illumination in the darkness. "Will this delay be problematic?" Kira asked, settling on the small sofa. Eliana checked her tablet, which displayed the latest progression scans. "Your condition is advancing faster than I anticipated. The markings are now at the base of your brain stem." She hesitated before adding, "We have perhaps 3 weeks, not 5. Kira absorbed this with remarkable composure. "Then perhaps we should not wait for ideal laboratory conditions to begin treatment." The implication sent Eliana's heart racing. Without proper monitoring, the initial reaction could be severe. "Life involves risk," Kira said simply. "My people believe that to achieve transformation, one must first pass through fire." Thunder rattled the reinforced windows, and rain lashed against the glass like urgent fingers. The storm had effectively cut them off from the outside world, creating a pocket universe where only the two of them existed. "Are you certain?" Eliana asked, her scientific objectivity wavering beneath the weight of something deeper. In answer, Kira reached up and slowly unclasped the front of her adapted Earth clothing, revealing the intricate network of blue markings that covered her torso. In the dim light, they appeared almost beautiful, cosmic rivers mapping the geography of her alien form. "I am," Kira whispered. Eliana's hands trembled slightly as she reached for Kira, both scientist and woman now. The first touch was electric, Kira's skin radiating heat that seemed to sear Eliana's fingertips. The alien's markings brightened in response, but she did not pull away. "Tell me if it becomes too painful," Eliana murmured, her lips close to Kira's ear. "Pain and pleasure are not so different," Kira responded, her voice acquiring a melodic quality Eliana hadn't heard before. "On my world, they are considered two expressions of the same energy." Their lips met in a kiss far less tentative than their first. Kira's markings flared, and she gasped against Eliana's mouth but pulled her closer rather than pushing away. Eliana's scientific mind noted the reaction even as her body responded with its own surge of heat. Clothing fell away beneath seeking hands, revealing the contrast between Eliana's olive skin and Kira's luminous pallor. The alien's body was similar to a human woman's in fundamental structure, yet subtly different, her ribcage more pronounced, her musculature arranged in fascinating patterns that Eliana traced with both scientific curiosity and growing desire. As they moved to Eliana's narrow bed, Kira's markings pulsed in waves that seemed to match the rhythm of the storm outside and the accelerating beat of Eliana's heart. Each touch caused them to flare, but Kira's expression reflected wonder rather than pain. "The sensation is transforming," she whispered as Eliana's hands explored her body. "Like fire becoming light." Eliana's scientific observations gradually gave way to more primal responses as Kira's otherworldly touch awakened sensations she'd forgotten were possible. The alien's fingers traced patterns across her skin that seemed to ignite nerve endings in unexpected configurations, creating cascades of pleasure that defied anatomical explanation. Their bodies entwined, skin against skin, human and alien finding unexpectedly compatible rhythms. Kira's markings grew brighter as her breath quickened, illuminating the small room with pulses of blue light that synchronized with their movements. Eliana watched in awe as the patterns shifted, no longer appearing rigid and painful but flowing like liquid starlight across Kira's skin. At the moment of culmination, Kira cried out, a sound that could have been agony or ecstasy, as her markings flared so brightly that Eliana had to close her eyes. When she opened them again, she found Kira trembling in her arms, golden eyes wide with wonder. "Are you all right?" Eliana asked, scientist reasserting itself over lover. Kira nodded, her expression one of astonishment. "The pain transformed. Like nothing I've experienced." She reached up to touch Eliana's face. "For a moment, I felt as though our genetic codes were actually communicating. Eliana brushed damp silver-white hair from Kira's forehead, noting with scientific interest and personal relief that the markings, while still present, had subtly changed in hue, shifting from electric blue to a deeper, more subdued cobalt. I need to collect samples, she said. To see if the exchange had the effect I hypothesized. Kira smiled, a gesture that transformed her alien features into something achingly beautiful. Always the scientist. It's who I am, Eliana replied, returning the smile despite her anxiety about the treatment's efficacy. It is one of the things I cherish about you, Kira said simply. As the storm continued to rage outside, Eliana gathered what samples she could with her limited emergency equipment. Her preliminary tests showed promising changes in Kira's cellular structure, subtle shifts that suggested the human genetic material was indeed creating the interference pattern she'd hoped for. But as Kira drifted into exhausted sleep beside her, Eliana stared at the ceiling, torn between hope and fear. The treatment showed promise, but would require repeated genetic exchanges of increasing intensity to fully neutralize the separation. Each intimate connection would deepen not only their physical bond but the emotional one that Eliana had not planned for in her clinical protocols. She had anticipated saving Kira's life. She had not anticipated losing her heart in the process. The treatments are working, Eliana said, studying the latest scan results. The progression has slowed significantly. A week had passed since their first intimate genetic exchange. Power had been restored to the lab after the storm, allowing for more precise monitoring and analysis. In that time, they had continued the treatments, each session leaving Kira's markings subtly altered and Eliana increasingly conflicted about the blurring lines between her scientific and personal interests. Kira stood before the full-body scanner, her naked form illuminated by its soft light. The blue markings that had once covered 70% of her body now occupied perhaps 65%, a small but significant reduction. More importantly, their character had changed from angry, jagged patterns to more fluid, harmonious designs. They no longer hurt as they once did, Kira confirmed, pulling a light robe around herself as she stepped from the scanner. The pain is now more like awareness. I can feel them, but they are becoming part of me rather than something foreign. Eliana nodded, making notes in her research log while carefully maintaining a clinical demeanor. Each intimate exchange left traces of her DNA within Kira's system, creating a progressive neutralization of the autoimmune response. But something else was happening too, something beyond her scientific understanding. There's something I haven't told you, Eliana said quietly, deactivating the scanner. Something I discovered 3 days ago. Kira moved closer, golden eyes intent on Eliana's face. During their intimate sessions, they had discovered that prolonged eye contact created a curious resonance between them, a connection that transcended physical touch. The genetic exchange isn't unidirectional, Eliana continued. Your DNA is also affecting mine. She pulled up a microscopic image of her own blood cells. These patterns weren't present before. They're subtle, but they're definitely derived from your genetic structure. Is it dangerous for you? Kira asked, concern evident in her voice. I don't think so. At least, not immediately. Eliana hesitated. But the more treatments we do, the more pronounced the effect becomes. My cellular structure is increasingly mimicking aspects of yours. Then we must stop, Kira said firmly. I won't risk your health. No, Eliana replied, with equal firmness. The treatments are working. And I've developed a theory about what's happening. She manipulated the holographic display to show a simulation of their combined genetic material. I think we're creating a third genetic pattern, neither fully human nor fully Athorian. A bridge between our species. The implications hung in the air between them. On my world, Kira said softly, there are ancient legends of such bridges. They were called resonants, beings who could exist between worlds. Eliana nodded. I suspect the separation might actually be a biological mechanism designed to prevent exactly this kind of genetic merging. A failsafe created by your ancestors to maintain genetic purity. Then what we are doing is... Kira trailed off. Revolutionary, Eliana finished. And potentially dangerous for both of us. Their eyes held for a long moment, the unspoken depth of their connection palpable in the air between them. I've created a serum, Eliana said, turning to her workstation where a vial of luminescent liquid glowed with a subtle blue-green light. It contains a stabilized version of our combined genetic material. Theoretically, it should accelerate the neutralization process without requiring further exchanges. Theoretically? Kira's voice held a note of skepticism. You don't sound convinced. Eliana sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. The serum needs a catalyst, something to activate the genetic integration at a cellular level. What kind of catalyst? Eliana hesitated. Complete genetic melding. More intense than anything we've done so far. Kira's expression softened with understanding. You mean a full reproductive exchange? Yes, Eliana confirmed, grateful for the alien's directness. The serum would need to be introduced during peak hormonal activity, when both our systems are most receptive to genetic transfer. And the risks? Kira pressed. Eliana's scientific objectivity warred with her growing personal investment. Significant. For both of us. Your markings could react unpredictably to such intense stimulation. And my system might not withstand the influx of alien genetic material. Yet you created the serum anyway, Kira observed. I need to be prepared for all scenarios, Eliana replied, though they both recognized the half-truth. Your markings have reached the base of your brain. We have perhaps 2 weeks before they begin affecting cognitive function. Before Kira could respond, the lab security system chimed with an unfamiliar alert. Eliana frowned, moving to her terminal. What is it? Kira asked. External monitoring detection, Eliana said, scanning the report with growing alarm. Someone's picked up energy signatures from the lab. Unusual ones. She pulled up satellite imagery of the surrounding area, revealing 3 black vehicles making their steady way up the mountain road toward the research facility. Government, Eliana said grimly. Probably Department of Advanced Threat Assessment. My research license doesn't cover extraterrestrial biology. Will they take me? Kira asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Not if I can help it, Eliana replied, already initiating security lockdown protocols. But we need to accelerate our timeline. She turned to face Kira fully, professional detachment falling away entirely. I need to tell you something I've been keeping from you. The serum, it's not just a treatment for you. It's designed to permanently link our genetic codes. Kira's golden eyes widened. What does that mean? It means that if it works, we'll be permanently connected at a cellular level. Your markings won't disappear, they'll transform. And I'll develop similar patterns, though presumably without the pain you've experienced. You would do this? Kira asked, her markings pulsing with emotion. Take on part of my curse? It's not a curse, Eliana said firmly. It's a transformation. And yes, I would. She glanced at the approaching vehicles on the monitor. But you need to understand the full implications. The serum would create a symbiotic relationship between us. We would be linked. Possibly able to sense each other's emotional states, maybe more. Kira was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she asked, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I was afraid, Eliana admitted. Not of the physical changes, but of what it represents. This isn't just science anymore, Kira. This is. She struggled to find the right words. Bond forming, Kira supplied, using an Athorian term her translator didn't convert. What my people call the sacred merging. Yes, Eliana said simply. The security system chimed again. The vehicles were now 15 minutes from the facility gates. We need to decide quickly, Eliana said. The serum is ready, but we would need to complete the genetic exchange before they arrive. Kira's expression shifted from concern to determination. No, she said firmly. No? Eliana echoed, her heart sinking. Not like this, Kira clarified. Not rushed, not with fear driving us. And not with you risking yourself for me. Kira, they'll take you. Study you. You'll never. I would rather face that fate than have you sacrifice yourself without full understanding, Kira interrupted. This bond you propose, it is irreversible in my culture. It is not undertaken in haste or under duress. Eliana opened her mouth to argue further when the facility lights suddenly dimmed, then brightened to almost painful intensity. Alarms blared as the security system detected an electromagnetic pulse from the approaching vehicles, standard procedure for neutralizing potential hostile technology. They're using EMP, Eliana said grimly. They know something unusual is here. She moved quickly to a storage unit, extracting a small medical case. Take this, she instructed, pressing it into Kira's hands. It contains emergency supplies and enough of the serum for one treatment. If we get separated. I will not leave you, Kira insisted. You might not have a choice, Eliana replied, already moving to secure her research data. There's a concealed exit through the geothermal maintenance shaft. If they breach the main entrance, you need to. The facility lights cut out completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by the ethereal glow of Kira's markings. Emergency systems kicked in with a whine, restoring minimal power. Too late, Eliana murmured, watching the security feed flicker to life, showing armored figures approaching the main entrance. They're here. In the dim emergency lighting, Kira's face was transformed by the blue glow of her markings. She moved to Eliana with fluid grace, taking the scientist's face between her hands. Whatever happens, she said softly, know that you have already saved me in ways beyond the physical. Eliana felt tears threatening, an unfamiliar sensation for someone who had spent years suppressing emotion in favor of scientific detachment. We're not giving up, she said firmly. A tremendous crash echoed through the facility as something heavy impacted the main entrance. The security feed showed a battering ram being positioned for a second attempt. In that moment of crisis, clarity crystallized in Eliana's mind. She grabbed the vial of luminescent serum from her workstation and, before she could reconsider, injected it into her own arm. What are you doing? Kira gasped, rushing forward. Improvising, Eliana replied, wincing as the serum burned through her veins. If they separate us, this ensures they can't fully understand what we've done. The serum is now in my bloodstream, but it needs the catalyst of our genetic exchange to activate fully. Another crash reverberated through the lab. The entrance wouldn't hold much longer. Time to make our last stand a memorable one, Eliana said, pulling Kira close. Are you with me? Kira's golden eyes shimmered with emotion. Always. As the assault team breached the facility entrance, 2 floors below, scientist and alien embraced in the soft glow of emergency lights and otherworldly markings, 2 beings from different worlds finding common ground in the most fundamental of genetic codes, and the most universal of emotions. As Eliana and Kira's lips met in a desperate, defiant kiss, the serum in Eliana's bloodstream ignited. Blue-green luminescence spread through her veins like wildfire, visible even through her skin. When their bodies pressed together, scientist and alien, human and other, the reaction cascaded exponentially. Kira gasped against Eliana's mouth as her own markings flared in response, no longer the painful electric blue of the separation but a brilliant silver white that bathed the laboratory in otherworldly radiance. The pain that had been her constant companion for years dissolved into a different sensation altogether, a feeling of expansion, of boundaries dissolving and reforming. "Eliana," she whispered, both awed and terrified by what was happening between them. "I can feel you, inside me." "I know," Eliana replied, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend what her body was experiencing. The serum had created pathways between them that transcended physical touch, neural patterns synchronizing, cellular structures exchanging information at impossible speeds. Their clothing fell away as if by mutual telepathic consent, skin meeting skin with an urgency born of both desire and necessity. Each point of contact between them sparked new connections, new pathways of integration. Eliana's hands trembled as they traced the glowing patterns on Kira's body, no longer seeing them as affliction but as a roadmap to something extraordinary. "Don't fight it," Kira murmured, guiding Eliana's movements with gentle hands. "My people have legends of this, the resonance. Let it flow through you." Eliana surrendered her scientific skepticism, allowing instinct to guide her. Their bodies moved together in perfect synchronization, each touch amplifying the genetic exchange that the serum had initiated. Kira's alien physiology responded to Eliana's in ways that defied human understanding, nerve endings connecting across species barriers, pleasure centers activating in harmonic progression. Below them, the sound of boots on metal stairs announced the imminent arrival of the government agents. But in their shared transcendence, such mundane threats seemed distant and irrelevant. "Now," Kira whispered, her golden eyes blazing with intensity. "Complete the bond." Their final union transcended mere physical intimacy, it was genetic, cellular, perhaps even spiritual. As they moved together in ancient rhythm, the boundaries between their separate beings began to blur. Eliana felt Kira's consciousness brushing against her own, alien thoughts and emotions flowing into her mind like water seeking its level. At the moment of culmination, the luminescence within them both flared to blinding intensity. A shockwave of energy pulsed outward from their entwined bodies, sending electrical systems haywire and knocking the approaching agents off their feet 2 floors below. In that moment of transcendence, Eliana experienced Kira's entire existence, the pain of rejection by her people, the lonely journey across the stars, the desperate hope that had led her to Earth. And Kira, in turn, absorbed Eliana's memories, her brilliant mind constrained by human limitations, her exile from the scientific community, her yearning for connection disguised as dedication to research. For one eternal instant, they were neither human nor Ithorian, but something new altogether, a bridge between worlds, exactly as Eliana had hypothesized. Then darkness claimed them both. Captain Maya Reyes had witnessed many strange things during her tenure with the Department of Advanced Threat Assessment. Unexplained phenomena were, after all, her specialty. But nothing in her extensive training had prepared her for what her team found in the mountain laboratory. The electromagnetic pulse had disabled most of the facility's systems, but something else, something far more powerful, had knocked out their own equipment and temporarily incapacitated half her assault team. By the time they reached the main laboratory on the 3rd floor, the strange energy signature they'd been tracking had subsided to background levels. "Status report," she barked into her communicator as her team secured the perimeter. "2 subjects, Captain," came the reply. "Unconscious but alive. One human female matching the facility's registered occupant, Dr. Eliana Mendez. The other, unidentified humanoid, definitely not terrestrial. Containment protocols in effect?" "Yes, ma'am. But you should see this yourself." Reyes found the subjects lying unconscious on the laboratory floor, partially covered by emergency blankets her team had provided. Medical officers were already checking vital signs, their expressions betraying their confusion. "What am I looking at, Lieutenant?" she asked. "Their vital signs are synchronized, Captain. Identical heart rates, identical brain wave patterns. And both subjects exhibit these markings. He gestured to the silvery patterns visible on the skin of both women, delicate, almost beautiful traceries that pulsed with subtle luminescence. The alien had them when we arrived, the medical officer added. But they're appearing on Dr. Mendez in real time. Spreading outward from points of contact. And look at this, he lifted a portable scanner showing cellular imagery. Their DNA is. I don't even have words for this. It's restructuring itself. Harmonizing. Some kind of contagion? Reyes asked sharply, instinctively stepping back. No, ma'am. More like symbiosis. Deliberate genetic engineering at a level beyond anything in our records. Before Reyes could respond, the alien woman's eyes fluttered open, startling gold irises without pupils. Seconds later, the human scientist also regained consciousness, her movements mirroring the alien's with uncanny precision. Dr. Mendez, Reyes said, stepping forward. I'm Captain Maya Reyes, Department of Advanced Threat Assessment. You're in violation of multiple research protocols and international agreements regarding extraterrestrial contact. Eliana sat up slowly, seemingly unconcerned by her state of undress or the armed personnel surrounding her. The silvery markings on her skin had stabilized into patterns that echoed those on Kira's body, more subdued on the human, but unmistakably similar. Captain, Eliana acknowledged calmly. I'd like to introduce Kira of Athoria. She came to Earth seeking asylum and medical treatment for a genetic condition. As you can see, we've made significant progress. The alien woman, Kira, inclined her head in greeting, her movements graceful despite her evident exhaustion. Your weapons are unnecessary, she said, her voice musical yet perfectly understandable. We present no threat to your world. That remains to be determined, Reyes replied stiffly. You'll both be transported to secure facilities for debriefing and medical evaluation. No, Eliana and Kira said in perfect unison, their voices overlapping in eerie harmony. Reyes stiffened. That wasn't a request, Doctor. You misunderstand, Eliana said, more gently now. Separation is not possible. Not anymore. She reached for Kira's hand, their fingers intertwining. Where their skin touched, the silvery markings brightened momentarily. We are genetically linked now. A symbiotic pairing. What happens to one affects the other. Fascinating claim, Reyes said skeptically. Our scientists will be eager to verify it. By all means, Eliana replied with surprising equanimity. But I should warn you, any attempt to separate us beyond a certain physical distance will trigger a neurological shutdown in both our systems. A failsafe we engineered into the bond. It was a bluff, but one delivered with such conviction that Reyes hesitated. Something about the synchronized movements of the two women, the way their markings pulsed in perfect rhythm, lent credibility to the claim. We offer an alternative, Kira said. Diplomatic asylum. Recognition of our unique status as a cross-species dyad. In exchange, we will share our research, minus certain sensitive details that could be weaponized. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Reyes countered. On the contrary, Eliana said, her voice steady. What we've accomplished here represents the most significant xenobiological breakthrough in human history. A genetic bridge between species that could revolutionize medicine, space travel adaptation, even human evolution itself. Or pose an existential threat to human genetic integrity, Reyes challenged. Only if misused, Kira responded. As with all scientific advances. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the unexpected arrival of Dr. Julian Chen, the department's senior xenobiologist, who had been monitoring the operation remotely. His eyes widened as he took in the scene, particularly the matching markings on both women. Resonant patterns, he breathed, stepping closer despite Reyes' warning gesture. Theoretical xenobiology postulated their possibility, but to actually witness stabilized cross-species genetic integration. You understand the significance, then, Eliana said, addressing her fellow scientist directly. Chen nodded, turning to Captain Reyes. We can't risk damaging what may be the most important scientific discovery of the century. Whatever protocols you plan to implement, I strongly recommend modification. 6 months later, the New Zealand sun warmed Eliana's face as she stood on the deck of their modest but comfortable research facility. The Southern Alps provided a dramatic backdrop to their new home, a compromise location that offered both the isolation they sometimes needed and proximity to a discreet international research community. Their status remained unique in legal terms, neither prisoners nor entirely free, but research partners under diplomatic protection. The markings on both their bodies had stabilized into permanent patterns, delicate silver traceries that pulsed with subtle luminescence during moments of strong emotion or when they used their shared abilities. Those abilities had been unexpected consequences of their genetic bonding. Nothing as dramatic as telepathy, but a constant awareness of each other's emotional states, shared dreams, and occasionally, in moments of deep connection, flashes of each other's thoughts. More practically useful was their heightened immune response and accelerated healing, developments that had made them particularly valuable to medical research. Kira emerged from the laboratory building, her silvery hair catching the sunlight. Though still unmistakably alien in appearance, she moved through the human world with increasing confidence, her natural grace complemented by Eliana's shared knowledge and memories. The latest results are promising, she said, joining Eliana at the railing. The modified gene therapy is showing 87% effectiveness against autoimmune disorders in the trial simulations. Eliana nodded, feeling the satisfaction flow between them like a shared current. From curse to cure, she mused. Your people would be astonished. Perhaps someday they will be, Kira replied. Though she seldom spoke of Athoria now, the longing for her homeworld occasionally surfaced in their shared dream space. The modified treatment contains nothing of our specific genetic signature, just the principles we discovered. No one need know it originated from a forbidden bond. Eliana turned to face her partner fully, taking in the alien beauty that had become so dear to her. The golden eyes that had once seemed so foreign now felt like home. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Becoming something neither fully of your world nor mine? Kira's markings pulsed with warmth as she took Eliana's hands in hers. Where their skin touched, the silvery patterns brightened and synchronized, a visible manifestation of their deeper connection. In becoming neither, we became something more, she said simply. The first of a new possibility. A bridge between worlds. She smiled, a gesture she had adopted from human culture but made entirely her own. Besides, I carry my world with me now, in memory, in genetic code, and in you. Eliana felt the truth of this in the bond they shared, the strange, beautiful synthesis that had transformed what was once a mark of despair into a sign of transcendence. Science had led her to the edge of understanding, but it had taken something more, something ancient and universal, to truly cross the divide between their worlds. As the setting sun painted the mountains in shades of amber and gold, the two women stood together on their shared threshold, not quite human, not quite alien, but something new beneath the stars that had once separated them and now watched over their unified path forward.